I heard this story from my grandfather. He was born during the Meiji era, and as a child, he worked with his father every day in the mountains. One summer evening, he was heading back down the mountain with his father at their usual time. However, this time, he noticed his mother was standing on the mountain path with a lantern, calling out his name. "Mum's come to get us!" he screamed, and then he tried to run towards her. However, his father suddenly grabbed his arm and pulled him back. "Why?" he asked, confused. "Did we tell your mother we'd be working on this side of the mountain today? Didn't we tell her we were going to the swamp? I could understand if she was waiting down below, but this is strange. That's not your mother," his father said. As the pair slowly approached her, suddenly she disappeared like a puff of smoke. And it turned out she had been standing right on the edge of a cliff, hidden behind some long grass. Things had almost gone very, very badly. Hey guys, I'm your host, Tara A. Devlin, and welcome to this week's episode of Kowabana, true Japanese scary stories from around the internet. The latest volume of Kowabana, volume 16, is now available. If you want even more creepy tales of ghosts, haunted buildings, curses, mysterious rituals, and much more, make sure to check it out right now. And if you're looking for more to listen to, you can also find the audiobook for Kijo, Japan's most notorious female criminals, either on our Patreon, Fourth Wall store, or various audiobook outlets, including Spotify and Audible. So don't miss out on that either if you're still looking for more. This week, we're looking at some weird, bizarre, and terrifying tales set in and around the many forests and mountains of Japan. First up, a young woman suddenly finds herself with a new younger sister after she's adopted from distant relatives. This girl grew up in the mountains far from civilization, but what exactly was life like all the way out there? Why did she have to leave and be adopted? Find out in Teggu-sama. This is a story I heard from one of my aunts. Apparently, she has a bit of a sixth sense, and she says her neighbours call her the legendary auntie. Ever since I was a kid, she always told me all sorts of scary stories, but I don't really believe in the occult or anything like that, so I've left out some of the more dubious parts and dramatised the story a little so it sounds more like a novel. I've also changed the place names and such too. But this is a story that took place in Japan about 50 years ago. At the time, my aunt was living in a certain city when she got a younger sister. It wasn't that her parents had another child, but rather they adopted a distant relative. Either way, my aunt was over the moon that she now had a younger sister. And this younger sister apparently had a rather unique accent that she was embarrassed about, but she quickly took to her new older sister. Before this, the younger sister had lived all the way out in the countryside without even a TV, so she knew all sorts of games instead. She was better than all the other kids in the neighbourhood at kicking a beanbag, and she knew all sorts of nursery rhymes and dances that the other kids couldn't understand. She knew a spell using blindfolds and dolls and chopsticks and ohajiki, which were like flattened glass marbles. Looking back on it now, it kinda resembled kokuri-san. She also knew a strange game nobody had ever seen before that used long ropes to pull each other around, like a tug-of-war, and she was a pro at the spinning top game that was all the rage amongst the local boys at the time. Up until that point, there wasn't a single girl in the neighbourhood who was interested in playing with spinning tops. But my aunt's younger sister was almost undefeated with the shell she brought with her from the countryside that she used as a spinning top. According to my aunt, she didn't think a shell spinning top had any chance against the iron ones, but this shell was oddly stronger than it looked, and it really left an impression on her. As they played together, my aunt realized that her younger sister knew so many games, so she asked her who taught them to her. "Yamababa-san," she replied. Apparently there was an old lady in her countryside village that they called Yamababa. This piqued my aunt's curiosity, so she asked her younger sister to tell her more about this woman. The following is the story my aunt heard from her younger sister about her former home in the countryside. For as long as she could remember, Yamababa-san had looked after my aunt's younger sister. All of the food they made in the countryside was delicious, but the one food she was addicted to was spiders preserved in miso. For some reason, none of the grown-ups other than Yamababa-san would eat these spiders, but most of the kids loved them. Her younger sister always said it was a pity that bigger cities never had any spider dishes. I also heard that from her myself. Every day, her younger sister spent her time playing with the other kids in the rice fields and mountains and swamps and rivers and caves. She had never once been to school. "Did you skip out on school?" my aunt asked her. But apparently, before she moved, her younger sister didn't even know what a school was. Yamababa-san taught her to read and write, and it wasn't until my aunt pointed it out that she realized that schools actually existed everywhere, and it was just her village that was odd. But here's where it gets even stranger. Their village was right in the middle of a forest. Not at the base of a forest or anything like that, but literally deep in the middle of a forest. That was where everyone lived. According to her younger sister, her village looked just like the ones she saw on an NHK special, showing secluded areas of Southeast Asia and the Amazon. The walls of Yamababa's house were made of mud and looked kind of like earthenware, and her roof was thatched too. There was an ancient, deep blue shrine gate by the entrance, and the inside of the house was like a shrine. There was an altar with either a bear or boar skin or something, and on it a statue of a Buddhist figure with numerous black hands and faces all over it, riding something that looked like a dog with deer horns. All of the other houses were wooden, however, although their roofs were also thatched. All of the villagers wore Japanese-style clothing, and some of them even had the top-knot hairstyle that was popular during the Edo period. There was also an unusually large number of children in the village, but other than a few who helped with the rice fields, who, according to my aunt's younger sister, she thinks were intentionally avoiding her, all of the kids just spent all day playing. Her younger sister often played with Yamababa-san too, but most of the time she just played on the mountain. In any case, she spent her days playing in various locations around the mountain, like in the forest, rivers, rice fields, swamps, ponds, waterfalls, and caves. She went fishing in the ponds, dove into the basins at the bottom of the waterfalls, messed around with large dogs, which, from the stories, can only have been wolves, poked around in bottomless swamps, and spent hours exploring caves. The entire mountain was her playground. Then, when they returned to the village, thoroughly exhausted, sometimes there would be less kids than had originally set out. Looking back on it, her younger sister realized how lucky she was to survive, and remembering those days sent a chill down her spine. But she also had a lot of fun memories, so she was happy that she was raised there. However, quite a few scary things happened as well. When she was playing in the forest, sometimes there were things that she could only describe as grotesque. Apparently, they called them imaginary friends. And while she didn't think much of it at first, looking back on it, while she was surprised by the feeling of something being out of place, it didn't exactly strike her as unpleasant. But the scariest thing was that one day, she was playing near something like a stony hill, and there she found all sorts of clay dolls, like Haniwa figures. She was so happy that she started playing house with them, but then a bunch of adults, who usually only worked in the fields and left the children to their own devices, unlike Yamababa, which was why the children liked her, came over and started screaming at her until their faces went pale. "Hey, if you mess around with Makabushi-sama's house, you'll die, you little brat!" It was probably a burial mound, my aunt said, but according to her younger sister, the adults never told her what exactly it was. At the time, my aunt, who was still rather skeptical when listening to her younger sister, asked her what her most fun memory of the countryside was. Smiling, she said, when a group of men, around 40 or so, dressed like Yamabushi in bearskins and wearing deer horns, visited. These men looked nothing like the other villagers, and she'd never seen faces like theirs before. Their features were deep set, and they had brown hair. She said they looked more like the foreigners she'd seen on TV after moving than they did Japanese people. When they entered the village, the men all bowed deeply before Yamababa-san. Then they rounded up all the other adult villagers and a few of the children, blindfolded them, put them inside a house, and then secured the door with some type of wooden lock so that they couldn't open it from the inside. They then summoned the rest of the children, formed a circle around them, and started chanting either sutras or prayers or something that sounded like a foreign language. Then they took some small white sweets out of a creepy jar covered in talismans, and they gave these to each of the children. "Okay, go play at Tangami-sama's place now," they said, and numerous cheers rose from the fields, and dark, faceless figures that appeared to be covered in mud appeared and started running towards the children. They grabbed the children's hands and tried to drag them back towards the rice fields. Some kids got dragged along, no idea what was going on, while some found it fun and ran over with them. Others cried and desperately tried to get away. And one after the other, they all disappeared into the mud. My aunt's little sister was the only one they didn't take. "You have been bewitched by Kodama-sama, little one," one of the men said. "So you mustn't stay here any longer. It may be sad, but we've spoken to the Japanese monks, so don't you worry." Come to think of it, she was the only one they didn't give a small white candy to. After that, they opened the door of the house, and when the villagers came out, they profusely thanked the men. "Teggu-sama, thank you so much! Oh, Teggu-sama, we couldn't do it without you." For the next few days, they all feasted, and then the men returned to the mountains. And a few days after that, when my aunt's younger sister was playing in the fields, suddenly some villagers blindfolded her and then took her down the mountain. They took the blindfold off once they reached flat ground, and there, For the first time in her life, she saw a car. Apparently, a distant aunt had come to pick her up and take her home. What on earth was fun about that scary story? My aunt asked her. Her younger sister looked confused. All of it, she replied. Two kids often play on the mountain behind their school, but one day they come across a sign they've never seen before after getting lost. What did they stumble upon and where did they really end up? Find out in No Entry Sign. When I was in the second grade, I went to the mountain behind our school with my good friend Takeshi to catch bugs. That hill was our playground, and we knew every square inch of it. Although it was honestly more like a mid-sized forest than a mountain, really. There's a red butterfly, Takeshi suddenly said and started running. I quickly followed him. We ran as fast as our feet would carry us, and then Takeshi stopped, out of breath. Take-chan, what's wrong? Did it get away? Yeah, it was huge though. We walked around, continuing to look for the red butterfly, but we weren't able to find it. As the sun started to set, it was about time for us to go home, so we started walking back. Now, on this particular mountain, we had a rule. Walk towards the sunset. Because if you did, then you would always find your way back to the road. The terrain of the mountain made it so that if you got lost and started walking towards the sunset, you would always come back to the road. However, that rule was unnecessary for us. We knew the mountain like the back of our hands. We would never have to rely on the sunset if we got lost. We chatted about video games as we walked back. Huh? What's that? There was a no entry sign in front of us. This was a mountain without any roads on it. We had no idea what it was, and it most definitely was not something that had been on the mountain before. What the hell? Did we go the wrong way? That's impossible. But I've never seen this place before. Yeah, me neither. Are we lost? Let's go back to where we came from first. Entirely unfazed, we started heading back. However, no matter where we went, the scenery was unfamiliar to us. There was just no way. Eh? Where the hell are we? Takeshi was about to cry. I'd also never been here before either. Well, for now, we decided to walk towards the sunset. That was this mountain's rule, after all. The sun was getting lower and lower in the sky. As we walked towards it, we soon found the road. I said goodbye to Takeshi and we went our separate ways. But when I was about 500 meters from home, Takeshi came sprinting up behind me. Apparently, there was a funeral being held at his house, and he was so shocked that he couldn't go back, so he chased after me instead. He pestered me to go back with him, so I did. They really were holding a funeral. It was Takeshi's older brother who died. However, nobody was at his house. It was also locked, so we couldn't go inside. And so I took the crying Takeshi back to my house instead. "I'm home," I said when I opened the door, and my father came running. As I stared at him, confused, he suddenly slapped me across the cheek. Then he dragged me inside and started screaming at me. Apparently, Takeshi and I had been missing for 2 days. We told him we were just on the mountain, but he didn't believe us. He also said there was no funeral at Takeshi's house. I was grounded for the next month and couldn't go out to play. When I was finally free again, Takeshi and I went back to that mountain, but we couldn't find that sign anywhere. Takeshi's older brother is still doing well even today. I heard he went to university in Tokyo and then got a job in Yokohama. Takeshi also lives by himself now, but he lives nearby, so we go out for drinks every once in a while. And whenever we do, we always end up talking about this story. A group of kids build a treehouse during the school holidays and, on their final day of freedom, decide to spend the night there. But are they as safe as they seem out there? What secrets are hiding in this land? Find out in Treehouse. I'm so bored. It was the summer holidays of 6th grade. 4 of us friends were sick of playing video games at home, but despite being kids, we had no idea how to kill all the free time we had. Hey, remember how we went to look at that fault line for science class about 6 months ago? Why don't we try some rock climbing there? We can take some ropes and shovels and such. At the time, our idea of fun was either playing video games at home or playing soccer at the nearby park. So this novel idea to try a different outdoor sport seemed new and fresh to our childish minds. We immediately got to work gathering items we could use to dig holes. Then we jumped on our bikes to head over to the tiny 4-meter-high fault. This fault was in the corner of a nearby forest, but when we got there, it already looked way different to when we had seen it half a year earlier. Now it appeared that all the vegetation below it had been cleared, as though getting ready to turn it into a field of some sort. Nothing was yet growing there, and the drainage was rather poor, so numerous large puddles had formed. With our spades and shovels, we got to work digging a hole at the bottom of the fault that we planned to use for our climb. Then one friend climbed to the top above the hole, secured some rope to a tree, and then dropped it into the hole we had just finished digging. And so, our climbing route to the top was complete. We were already pretty satisfied with that, but then I had another idea. Hey, let's build a treehouse at the top. There was a junkyard near the forest with old scrap wood, and there was more than enough for us to build a treehouse out of. Everyone agreed, and so we decided to build a treehouse at the top of the fault. However, by the time we finished our rock climbing route, it was already evening, so we had to go home. But the next day, we returned with hammers and nails, used that rope to lift materials to the top, and then we got to work building. While we were working on the treehouse, the people who owned the land occasionally spotted us. Every time they did, they screamed like crazy at us and chased us away. However, they apparently never saw what we were working on, so we took a different route to transport our materials, and the operation then continued smoothly. And so, a week later, we had finished a simple roof for our treehouse. By that point, there was only 1 week of the summer holidays left, so we decided to spend our final week at the treehouse playing to our heart's content. We gathered some frog eggs we found in the puddles at the bottom of the fault, then put them in a clear bag we hung from a tree. Then we made a little sunken fireplace inside the treehouse where we put some firewood. We even made graves for the dead crows and tanuki we found while in the forest. We washed our hands and feet in those same puddles, and dug a hole near the treehouse to use as an outhouse. We felt just like wild, feral children. We explored the forest at the top of the fault like we were Tarzan, and our parents got angry at us for dirtying our clothes. Then, with only 3 days of the holidays left, the 4 of us promised to spend an entire night at the treehouse as a sort of last hurrah. We lied to our parents and said we were going to stay at each other's houses. Then, with some food, sleeping bags, and blankets, we all gathered at the treehouse. When the sun fell that night, the treehouse was pitch black. The forest didn't have any sources of light, after all. One of my friends brought a battery-powered lamp, so we turned it on and we sat around it, chatting. "So, what do you want to do now?" "Why don't we check out the shrine?" Just a short distance through the forest was a shrine with an Oni mask on its ceiling. Kids claimed that the mask grew a body at night, or if you went there alone, it would eat you head first, etc. We told all sorts of scary stories about it. "All right, let's go." And then, as we were on our way to the shrine, suddenly a mysterious figure appeared. Nah, just kidding. But one friend suddenly said they were scared and didn't want to go. And so, that was the end of that. We just continued sitting there in silence. Because the forest is so quiet at night, and we weren't exactly used to such silence, we turned on a radio someone had brought. We were soon engrossed in radio shows we normally wouldn't listen to. But, with nothing to do, I put a blanket over my head and, before long, I was fast asleep. When I woke up the next morning, everyone was still asleep. Suddenly, I remembered the frog eggs we put in that bag a while back. Wondering what they looked like now, I went over to where they were hanging from the tree. Even from afar, I could see the bag looked kind of full of small, bumpy things. When I got closer, I could see it was full of white tadpoles, like albinos. The sight creeped me out, but thinking that these tadpoles might have died because we tied them up made me feel terribly sad. I woke everyone up and dragged them over to the bag. I wanted to pay my respects to the tadpoles, so we dug holes to bury them. Once we were done, I reached out for the bag. However, these colourless tadpoles that even had white eyes, that I thought were dead, suddenly started moving all around in the bag. They were alive. When we saw that, we were so scared and creeped out that we all screamed and ran home. After that, everyone who stayed at the treehouse caught a cold and we all missed the next week of school. At the time, we used to joke about what happened, saying stuff like it was the Oni mask's curse, or that we angered the mountain Kami-sama, stuff like that. And looking back on it now, yeah, it was kinda creepy, but it's still a fond memory of mine. But thinking about what happened now, there was one thing that I do regret. There was a sign right at the bottom of that fault, wasn't there? High concentration agrochemical testing grounds. No entry. Some high school students visit Lake Yamanaka for their summer training camp, and during their first night decide to head out and have a look around. But what do they run into out there, and is the area really as deserted as it seems? Find out in Lake Yamanaka Boarding House. This might not be a scary supernatural story, but let me write it down anyway. When I was in high school, we visited Lake Yamanaka during the summer holidays for our club training camp. There was this incredibly old pension run by a university that our club stayed at each year. The closest houses and convenience store were 2 kilometers away, so it was in the middle of nowhere. But it was just a 3-minute walk to Lake Yamanaka. We had just started high school, so we were all worked up and, of course, stayed up late. Then someone suggested we take part in a test of courage. I think there were 4 guys and 4 girls. Now, despite it being a test of courage, we didn't prepare anything for it, and we didn't know the area, so it was more like a simple walk around the area. I think it was around 2 or 3 a.m. Being that we were all city kids, I think we were more excited about the huge bugs and all the stars in the night sky and stuff like that, and we happily suggested walking an entire lap of the lake. When we reached the lake, we could see 2 or 3 fires in the distance, so we figured some university students were playing with fireworks or something. There were no cars, nor even any streetlights, so it was pitch black. We didn't see any other people, but 1 or 2 lights were moving while one remained still. Plus, it was the summer holidays. At any rate, we approached the water and remarked that if they were university students, we should ask them to let us join. However, 2 of the guys and 1 of the girls seemed a little scared and not exactly into that idea. The summer holidays just started. There's no way university students would be here already, one said. It's pitch black. We can't tell how far away they are, and I don't want to get lost this late at night anyway, said another. You better not go that way, an old guy said as he passed us as well. This unsettled the guys so much that they even grabbed each other's hands. The other guys ignored him and kept going, but a few moments later, the movement of the lights suddenly stopped. Thinking that maybe they had noticed us, one of the guys screamed, "Hey! Excuse me!" Then, a few moments later, one light went out. And then, another. "Hey, let's go back now," someone said. Look, we don't even know if they're university students to begin with, and that guy said we shouldn't come this way as well, so... Who said that? That guy we passed before. We all turned around, but there was no old guy anywhere to be seen. It happened only a few minutes prior, and there was only a single road leading from the boarding house, and yet we couldn't see anyone. Well, it was pitch black, so that wasn't exactly strange. But then we all finally realized something. That's weird, right? There aren't any houses around here, and why would an old guy be walking around the lake at this time of night without a light? Looking around, all of the lights we had seen were now gone, and everything was pitch black. "Hey, this is bad, man," someone said, and then we all started sprinting back towards the boarding house. Although, by the time we got back, everyone was laughing and joking about how scary it had been. We all stayed up until morning, and then we went back again in the light of day. However, the area where we saw the lights was out on the water, and there were no paths or boats or anything leading to it. The fog was unfortunately too thick for us to get any closer as well. We also looked up other boarding houses, but ours was the only one in the area. So what on earth did we see that night? So, the reason I remembered this story is because last night I had the same experience once again. On my way back from a visit to the convenience store, I saw a faint light near the shrine. Thinking it might be someone with fireworks, I tried to head towards it, but an old lady passed by me. "You shouldn't go that way," she said. When I looked again, the light was gone, and I returned home thinking I must have imagined it. But then it hit me. Why would an old woman in a kimono be out and about at 3 a.m.? It reminded me of what happened when I was in high school. Maybe it's not that scary, but it was certainly a strange story for me. And finally this week, a young man shares a tale his father once told him about why he's so traumatized by mountains and refuses to go near them anymore. What did he really encounter out there? Find out in Trauma Mountain. I was looking at scary story websites on my phone and saw a story about an old guy on a motorbike who ran into a monster in the mountains. It reminded me of a story my own father told me about how when he was little, he also saw something strange in the mountains. I don't know if it's scary or not, but let me tell you the story that traumatized my father so badly that he can no longer visit mountains. When my father was in elementary school, he would visit the mountains on Sundays with his father to pick wild vegetables. They always parked at the bottom of the mountain and then walked up. On this particular day, they turned off the path and started looking for wild vegetables in an area full of dense trees. My father stuck close to his father's side so he didn't get lost, but at some point, he realized he'd gotten separated from him. And of course, he was lost. He was so lost that he couldn't even tell which way he'd come from. However, when he yelled for his father, he got a reply in the distance. "Oh, thank God. I was panicking for a moment there," he thought. So he started moving in the direction of the voice. He sighed in relief when he saw a hand in the distance waving at him, and a voice called out, "Hey!" However, as he ran towards it, he realized something was off. That figure in the distance was too small to be his father. And as soon as he realized that, he stopped dead in his tracks. "Hey!" the figure in the distance said again, still waving. Ah, maybe it was someone else picking vegetables, my father thought. But as he got closer, the figure still remained dark, like a shadow. By this point, he was close enough that he should be able to see the person's clothes and expression in the sunlight. As he stood there, that shadowy figure took 2 or 3 steps towards my father, still waving its hand. Then it seemed to stretch to an extra meter in height. "Eh?" my father thought, taking a step back. As he did, the figure contracted and got smaller again. When my father told me this, I burst out laughing at how comical the image was, but apparently my father was so scared at the time that he nearly wet himself. This time, the shadow came about 10 steps closer and stopped. "Hey!" it said, waving its hand. This time, it stretched to about 2 meters in height, and my father was finally able to see what it was. The creature was dark as a shadow and naked from the waist up. It was wearing a black loincloth, and its arms and legs were all unnaturally long. It also had a bit of a pot belly. The creature's long black hair reached the ground, and its face was like a skull without eyes. It just had holes for a nose and a mouth open so wide it was like its jaw had become unhinged. It's kinda hard to describe with words, but when my father told me about it, he drew me a picture of what it looked like. The shadow was some bizarre creature that could grow taller, and my father stood frozen in shock before it. As he stood there, the creature got closer and closer, growing to be even taller than the trees. Their branches snapped as it grew, and then it said just one thing. "Hey!" My father screamed and took off running, but then he tripped and fell. Looking back, he saw that shadow had returned to its former size. He realized that the further away it got, the smaller it was, and the closer it got, the bigger it was. Standing up, my father started running again, screaming his father's name. He kept checking behind him as he ran, but no matter how much he bobbed and weaved through the trees, that creature continued following him at the same pace. Whenever he stopped, too exhausted to go any further, that creature approached him, getting bigger and bigger. On and on this continued, for what felt like hours, until finally he reached the winding mountain road with cars on it. They had taken that road to get there themselves, so he continued running along it all the way back to their car. When he turned back around this time, the creature was no longer following him. It was gone. Relieved, all of the energy drained from his body. He started walking, and then he saw his father's car coming towards him. He was on his way down the mountain to report his son missing to the police. His father slapped him across the head and, while he was dazed, put him in the passenger's seat. My father gazed out the window as his father drove, and for a moment, he could have sworn he saw that large creature staring at him from between the trees. But when he blinked and jumped in shock, it was gone. He then trembled the rest of the way back down the mountain. And that's the story of my father's experience on the mountain. When my father told me about it, I asked my grandfather whether it was really true or not. He said that at the time, my father really did claim that some shadowy monster had chased him. I don't know if he was lying or telling the truth, but my father is abnormally afraid of mountains. And even just hearing the name of that particular mountain makes all of the color drain from his face. A huge thank you and shout out to this week's Kami tier members, Scarly and Emerald. It's thanks to your support, along with everyone else, that I'm able to keep doing this show, so thank you very much. Don't forget to check out Kowabana Volume 16, out right now, and check out our merchandise store at kowabana-shop.fourthwall.com. And if you'd like to chat about this week's stories, come and join us in the Kowabana Discord. You can find that link in the description or on kowabana.net. You can also check out our Patreon at patreon.com/TaraADevlin for exclusive bonus stories and extras, or our YouTube channel at youtube.com/KowabanaJapan for all sorts of Japanese horror you won't find anywhere else. Thanks guys, stay safe, and I'll see you again next time for even more Kowabana. True Japanese scary stories from around the internet. Want even more scary stories? Head over to kowabana.net for new translations every week. You can also join our Patreon for exclusive stories you won't find anywhere else. Head over to kowabana.net now.